Okay, second video in my truth of the AR15 discussion. And as a quick demonstration for those coming from the first video who may not have trusted my words, this being the round fired by the AR-15. Just a quick demonstration. AR-15 magazine. AR-15 firearm. The round fits right in there. As you can see, this is a dummy round designed to mimic. It's the same size, because I don't want to load a real round into a gun in my house. There you go. It fit right in, and there it goes flying. So there. That proof that that is indeed the correct one. Now, second part of this video, we're discussing, is the AR-15 a weapon of war? Well, my first point would be that in a very real technical sense, no, it is not. The rifles that are sold to civilians were never designated as military arms for the military. They may be made very similar, using very similar parts, but there are technical differences. And those technical differences are around the firing mechanism, in that the AR-15 is semi-automatic only, meaning it will automatically reload the next round for you into the firing position, but it will not subsequently automatically fire it for you. If you pull the trigger on an AR-15, one round will fire, and only one round, no matter how long you hold the trigger back. You must release the trigger and pull it again to get a second shot to fire. Now, as opposed to a fully automatic, which will, when the trigger is held to the rear, continue to fire until the magazine is empty. So, from a technical standpoint, that's the difference. Now, something that has been said, maybe you know, maybe you don't, AR-15, AR does not mean assault rifle, it means Armalite rifle, because there were many AR firearms that were in no way related to assault rifles. There was a small little survival firearm that was designed, I think it was the AR-7, shot these little tiny guys, because it was developed by the Armalite company, and they just numbered their designs. So, the rifle is similar. The AR-15 is very similar to the M16 and M4 carbine used by the military, but there are technical differences, as I said. But here's the real thing. Weapon of war is a term thrown around to invoke emotion, to instill fear and awe of, if the military uses it for war, it must be special and extra deadly. It does something different. It doesn't. It does nothing special at all. As what I've shown in the first video, it does not fire a particularly potent round. It definitely doesn't fire a full power rifle round, such as these. It fires something weaker. And it doesn't do anything else to make the round more powerful. The cartridge and the design is what makes the firearm deadly or not. All firearms are deadly by their nature if used in such a capacity. But when it comes to outright power and potential to inflict harm that subdues quickly, something like this is definitely more powerful than something like this. Now, what do I mean weapon of war doesn't matter? You're sitting there saying it's a copy of a rifle used by the military for wartime. It may not fire full auto, but otherwise it's the same. It's basically a weapon of war. Weapon of war, like I said, is meaningless. All firearms in existence, for the most part, are analogous to a firearm that has been used in war at some point. Early firearms, the muzzle-loading muskets and similar firearms of that type, were used all the way up through the American Civil War time frame, and they were hundreds of years of use. They are weapons of war in that regard. They were used for war reasons. And even though the cowboy lever action firearms, the ones that you hope that you can see them in the movies and shows, they have to move the little lever at the bottom, like in this kind of a motion to reload. Those saw limited use in the American Civil War, so they were used in wartime as well. And even revolvers were used as sidearms. All the way up into World War II, armies were using revolvers as sidearms. So they are weapons of war. And most people don't think twice about a lever action or a revolver. They think those are mundane, everyday kind of guns of no special importance. And then there's the bolt action rifles. They were the main firearms, infantry firearms used by most countries during World War I and World War II. Semi-automatic firearms were a bit rare, especially in combat firearms. In World War II, the U.S. was kind of ahead of the game when we fielded a semi-automatic rifle, basically from the get-go of our entrance into the war. So even bolt actions, the same type of rifle used by so many for hunting reasons and competition reasons, similar to firearms used in the most deadly wars mankind has ever seen. In fact, a fun little tidbit, the old bolt action sitting in your granddad's or great-granddad's closet for all those years that you never thought twice about. You knew he used it for hunting back when he was still spry enough to get around. May be a genuine, real weapon of war, meaning a rifle that was used in actual combat to fire at other human beings and inflict injury and death. Because after World War II, after winding down from a large war, many countries, they had an abundance of rifles that they no longer needed, and a lot of debts that need to be paid, and things like that by the countries. So they sold these rifles on the civilian market, and they sold them to less developed countries around the world as well, but they definitely sold them to civilians. Some of them bought them and kept them as collector's items because they were veterans or whatever and they wanted something from their time. Others bought them because they were a cheap rifle that they can get for hunting. They would take it to a gunsmith, have the gunsmith mount a magnified optic, a scope on it, and they would trim down the stock because the stocks were made very big and heavy so they could withstand the rigors of the battlefield. But such was no longer needed. They would rather it be lighter. So they would trim down the stocks for those reasons. It's called sporterizing, and collectors hate it because they are no longer worth anything on the collector's market at that point. But it was a common thing to do back in the late 40s, early 50s, and even 60s and stuff. So a rifle that people have seen, definitely haven't thought twice about, probably, were genuine weapons of war used in anger. If you've touched it, you may have touched a rifle that has been used to kill another human. But nobody thinks twice about it. Weapon of war is just a term meant to instill fear and awe. It's meaningless term. The AR is not special. The M16 is not special. The M4 is not special. It doesn't do anything to make them extra effective beyond what the base functionality of a rifle. There's some form differences that mostly help with some ease of handling reasons, but it's not like it's night and day differences. The old style stocks were just as useful, and in fact there are ARs that have been made to fit more traditional stocks in states and countries that do not allow such a setup. So if the AR does nothing special, as I said, it's not special. It's mundane for the most part. And people all the time want to talk about the old assault weapons ban from '94. Just a little clue you in, they didn't actually ban these rifles. They banned features of the rifle, which is all the new kind of legislation I see kind of does basically as well. And those features, guns could have one type of feature, one of a list of features. There was a list of things that were considered bad features, basically. On that was three of the things were an adjustable buttstock, a pistol grip, and a flash hider. You could have one of those things, but not all. Since the pistol grip was pretty much necessary for the firearm, all companies did was they just didn't put a stock that you could adjust on it, and they didn't put a flash hider on it. Sold them like that. They were still bought plenty back in the day. So there you go. They are. It's nothing special. Don't let the term weapon of war fool you into thinking it does something special. It doesn't. I'm thinking I may do a third video with a little bit of extra information here. Just we'll go into a bit of the philosophy of why these things matter, why these definitions matter, why it matters what is truth or not. So maybe I'll see you there.